Hi, my name is Martin Purnell, and welcome to Off-Grid Christianity, a weekly podcast for those who go or don't go to church, and for those that are disillusioned. Should you wish to contact us, our email address is ogc@accessradio.biz, and check out our Facebook page, Off-Grid Christianity. Today's guests have been happily married, well, I hope they've been happily married since 1984, and are well known for being in their acting profession as well as music. They're very popular guests in churches and events, sharing their faith. Gold records galore from sales for both of them, despite one of the two rejecting an offer to form a band with his friend from Cheltenham. But hey, who would want to be in the Rolling Stones? It gives me great pleasure to welcome to Off-Grid Christianity from Manfred Mann, the blues band and legendary even presenter of Radio 2's The Blues Show, Paul Jones. Paul, thank you for joining us today. It's great to have you company, sir. How are you feeling?
Thank you, Martin.
And you're all well.
Yes, indeed.
Good stuff. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome also an accomplished actress, star of ITV's The Widows, now a US movie remake, and she played Bianca once for the Royal Shakespeare's Company production of Kiss Me Kate. She's the wife of Paul. Hello, Fiona Hendley. Hello, Fiona. Thanks for joining us as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Well, fingers on the buzzers, no conferring if that's okay. I think you might have heard these podcast questions before. So we'll see how we go on that. That'd be great. And because you're a couple, I've also got a bonus question or two lined up at the end. Let's see how we get on. Will I get away with it? Question number one. If you could invite anybody from history for an evening meal, alive or dead, so that you could ask them questions, who would it be? Let's go with Fiona first. Who would you go with, Fiona?
Well, I would go with somebody that possibly lots of people would go with, but I just can't help but say Mother Teresa. And it's because, as a teenager, I remember struggling with the whole idea of nuns. I wasn't a Christian at that point. I did believe that there was a God, but I hadn't yet come into a relationship with a loving Heavenly Father. And I heard about nuns and I thought, well, why do they sort of lock themselves away in these big places and never come out? Of course, I didn't understand about the power of prayer then. But when I heard about Mother Teresa and the glorious and beautiful things that she did in her life, and the giving and the loving, the meekness, the gentleness, wanting to just help people in life, wow, that changed everything. And I would just love to sit with her and say, what was your experience of Jesus, and what put that burning desire in you to love people?
Great answer. Great answer. Thank you very much indeed. You haven't been the first person to choose her, I'm just saying. It's a good choice.
I knew it.
Thank you very much indeed. Paul, sir, who would you choose?
The painter Caspar David Friedrich, who lived a couple of centuries ago, and he comes into our testimony because it was his paintings that softened my atheism round the edges and eventually destroyed it completely, so that I was then ready, when the opportunity arose, to become a Christian.
Wow.
I would love to be able to ask him what it was like. He was, because his Christianity was so very much in the forefront of what he did. There were people who made fun of him, and possibly you'd go even far enough to say mocked him and his circle of Christian friends and colleagues. Also, because I'm still alive and he's not, I would be able to tell him how enormous his influence was after he died, and also ask him what he thought about the fact that now his work is often used or dragged in to somewhat darker artistic projects.
Okay.
I think he possibly would be a little bit concerned about that, and I would love to know what he thought.
What's his name again?
Caspar Friedrich, middle name David or David.
can pronounce David. Who can do that? Where's he from? Or where was he from, Paul?
I think he was originally Scandinavian, possibly Danish. I'm not sure. But he lived in Germany for, I think, most of his considerable working life.
And how many years ago are we talking about?
2 centuries ago, roughly. So, which would make him a contemporary of Wordsworth or Beethoven or somebody. But he interestingly, his work influenced the set designer of what was that musical thing that Cliff did?
Heathcliff.
Yes, there's Heathcliff. The musical of Wuthering Heights, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I didn't know because we never went to see it, but Cliff told us many years later that it was Friedrich who was the inspiration for the set design of that Heathcliff job.
Wow. I saw Cliff in Time, but I don't think that was inspired at all by David.
No, it was inspired by Marvel Comics, wasn't it?
Something like that. And Dave Clark of the Dave Clark 5, I think, produced it, didn't he?
Yes, it was. Dave, he was the producer.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good little show. Couldn't understand a word of it, but it was very good. Thank you for that answer. That's great. Question 2 then. Fiona, again, back to you. Who is your favourite biblical character or favourite biblical story or favourite parable, please, Fiona?
Well, I mean, this is a completely naughty question. It's not really supposed to be allowed because it depends where you are on your journey, doesn't it? But all right, so I'm going to be very obvious again and say someone who tons of people will have said, but it's the truth. Yeah. So I have to say it. I'm going to say Joseph. Because
which one?
I have gone
Which
back.
one?
Oh, I apologise. Joseph in the Technicolor wonderful coat that his father made for him, Jacob made for him in the Old Testament. I just love that story. I just absolutely love the fact that this young man, yes, he was loved by his father more than his brothers, and he was the sort of last little son to come along for a while, and so now Jacob's an older man, and it's not nice when that happens. I'm not the youngest in my family, but I feel for Joseph because he gets lots of people saying he was sort of braggadocious.
Yes.
But when he had those dreams, he was just excited. 17-year-old excited. He tells his brothers and they hate him even more for it. And of course they try and kill him and throw him down a pit, But what the wonderful thing about Joseph is that he never gives up. The things that happen to him, he was thrown down a pit, supposed to be torn to shreds by wild animals. Okay, they change their minds and instead sell him as a slave. So now he's a slave, sent to Egypt, but he just gets on with things and makes the best of everything. In any situation he's in, he makes the best. And it says the Lord was with him and the favor of God was on him. And it was seen on him, the fact that he had this relationship with God. And there he is in Potiphar's house, a slave, and yet he does his best and he makes the most of it. And Potiphar just, gives him run of everything. It's just a very encouraging thing on our journeys in life. So what happens is, Potiphar's wife tries to lie with him. He runs away. She lies about him and says, he tried to rape me. So Potiphar throws him now in prison. So now he's had his family try to kill him. He's now in prison for something he didn't do. He was trying his best. You would think that he'd be in the corner of a prison cell, rocking backwards and forwards, sort of in a state of great despair. And yet, no, he tries to help run the prison. So he is now doing his absolute best to help the jailers run that place. And he's in there for years. Eventually, a butler and a baker get thrown in prison by Pharaoh. And he walks into where they are one day and says to them, "Why are you looking so sad?" "Actually, Joseph, you're in prison as well. You're a prisoner." "What do you mean, why are we looking sad?" you should be sad. But he wasn't. He was holding on to the dream that he had when he was 17. He had this wonderful couple of dreams that showed that one day he would do something great. And, you know, very often if you have a dream, you can't always tell people because they won't understand. But the wonderful thing is, one day, Pharaoh has a dream, as you know, and Joseph was brilliant at interpreting dreams. He had a gift from God to interpret dreams. He did so for Pharaoh and was made prime minister. He came out of prison. I love it. Just before he's released from prison, when Pharaoh finds out that he can interpret dreams, and you can imagine the jailers coming to get him, and they say, Pharaoh wants to see you. And he says, just a minute. And he goes and shaves, puts on clean clothes, gets himself ready to stand before the Pharaoh. This man is amazing. And of course, he is able to interpret Pharaoh's dream. And Pharaoh's just knocked out by the wisdom. He can see that he has a relationship with this amazing God and makes him prime minister. And he's able to stop people going through famine, starving to death. He comes up with a plan. The Lord obviously helps him with a plan so that people can eat through this terrible famine time. And it's just a wonderful story. And he even meets up with his family again and forgives them for what they did to him. When I've been feeling, this journey could be hard, or this difficulty or this challenge has come along, I think, no, look at Joseph. Look at the way that he stayed in there with you, Lord. He made the best of every difficult situation he ever dealt with. And he came out and he got to his dream in the end, the dream that you'd put in his heart way back when he was a 17-year-old boy. And it's very, very inspiring and encouraging.
Brilliant answer. I think that's probably the best answer I've ever had for that question. Thank you, Fiona. Yeah, very good indeed. And obviously, you know, because I know you listened to the Christmas edition with Noel and Martin Scott. And my question was about Joseph, because he was the first tennis player in the Bible, of course, as he duly found out, because he served in the courts of Egypt. Moving on very swiftly to Paul. Paul, who would you choose, please, good sir?
Well, I've chosen. I'm not going to come anywhere near that. I've chosen Mordecai.
Oh yeah.
Or rather, the Book of Esther.
Yeah.
Because he seems a jolly decent chap. I mean, here he is. He's got an uncle and aunt, and they've got a little girl, a daughter, who is therefore his cousin. And the uncle and aunt die, and so he becomes parent, as it were, to the little girl. Yeah. And she grows up beautiful, and as you know, she becomes the queen of Ahasuerus, or Xerxes, whether you want to call him by his Persian or his Greek name. So, yeah, Ahasuerus gets very cross with his existing wife, who refuses to obey a command that he utters. And so she loses her job. And then he looks for the sort of most beautiful young woman he can find, and it turns out to be Esther. And so Mordecai becomes, sort of family to the royal family of whatever it was. He constantly sort of advising Esther through this story, but he's also allows himself to be advised by her, because she might be sort of closer to the king, as she is, with a better grasp of sort of the rules and regulations of how things work and so on. Anyway, the story is that there's this horrible character who, if this were a pantomime, would be sort of Baron Bad Breath or something. And his name is Haman. And basically, he's anti-Semitic. Yeah. To the point of distraction. He basically wants to kill all the Jews. Esther tells her cousin, or guardian, it might be the better way to look at it, Mordecai about this, and Mordecai's response is very, very straightforward. He says, well, if he gets his way, don't forget that you will be one of the people that he exterminates, because he wants to kill all the Jews. She says, she doesn't even say, well, I know that, because she does know that.
Yeah.
And essentially, what's great about the story and why it's so sort of enjoyable, really, is that the awful Haman creates his own destruction. And it's purely because he's so self-centered and so pleased with himself. And the king has been warned by Mordecai in the past that a couple of people who were close to him, working for him, high up in the sort of royal circle, were plotting to kill him. And so he brings the plot to the notice of the king, and the king gets rid of the two plotters and says, thank you very much. But he hasn't sort of done anything to help Mordecai. So at some point he thinks, really, I ought to do something to reward Mordecai for saving my life, essentially. And Haman, meanwhile, has cooked up this plot as to get the king to agree that all the Jews in the whole country must be exterminated. He's going to be invited to a lunch, which the king and the queen, Esther, are having the following day. And he plans to hang Mordecai outside the castle.
Yeah.
And so he erects this gallows, which is 50 meters high or something like that. And then the king says to him, Haman, what do you think ought to be done to somebody deserving of royal favor? And of course, Haman thinks it's him that the king is talking about. So he says, oh my goodness, well, you've got to give him a horse that you've ridden on and clothing that you've worn, and you've got to have special pageants where he is riding this horse through the crowds and they're clapping and all that sort of stuff. And the king says, marvelous, go and get that sorted for Mordecai. Love it.
Yeah.
And of course, in the end, it's Haman who gets hung on the gallows that he has built himself for the purpose of killing Mordecai. And the Jews are all saved. And not only Haman, but anybody else who hates Jews, anybody anti-Semitic, is dealt with as well. And I think it's a marvelous story. And Mordecai comes out of it as, he's actually very humble, but at the same time, he's not afraid to say what things are when they are.
Yeah.
And I like him.
Wow. Well, there was I saying Fiona's answer was probably the greatest. I think it's a very close contest between yours and Fiona's, Paul. Thank you. And Baron Bad Breath, I think that is a character I shall always associate now with Hammond. Thank you. Just by the way, very quickly, in your musical careers, your acting careers, did either of you ever think of doing Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, or maybe you did?
Oh, I did it more than once. I think it might have been 3 times altogether.
Wow.
I think you would have been. I wish I'd seen it. I wish, but it was quite a long time ago. But I've seen pictures, and you look absolutely the perfect Joseph.
Wow.
Yes. Well, until Jason Donovan.
Whoever he is.
But any more or less any actor of my age and build had to do it at one time or another.
Where did you do it, Paul?
One of the places was the Westminster Theatre, which was actually owned by the Moral Rearmament Organisation at one time. I also did tours of it. I can remember being on tour. Oh, Ken Hill directed at least one of the productions that I was in. And it went on tour, and he'd done a couple of sort of clever things, little additions. And we got to Oxford, and Andrew Lloyd Webber came to see it. And he left behind a note saying that such and such a piece of additional musical cleverness would be removed from the production by the following evening, or the production would cease.
Wow.
So it was. It didn't affect me, actually, whatever it was.
Oh, so it wasn't a harmonica solo then, or anything else like that?
No, it wasn't. I did actually, funnily enough, I did actually play a harmonica solo in the Westminster Theatre production. It was a little sort of cowboy piece that Tim Rice did called One More Angel in Heaven, if you remember that.
No.
It had a sort of loping horse hoof sort of rhythm to it. And it was very much a sort of round the campfire sort of piece of music. And so the same director who put in the other cunning bit put in my harmonica solo, but it wasn't rejected. As far as I know, Andrew Lloyd Webber never sort of took any exception to it. In fact, he hired my harmonica more than once on other occasions.
There's a nice story on the outcome of that. Thank you. Just a matter of interest, was this before or after you became a Christian that you did Joseph?
Oh, well before. I mean, wasn't Joseph in the
early 70s? It first came
60s
out. 60s
or 70s or something. I actually did a record of it. I remember one of the productions that I was in was recorded, and it came out on Music for Pleasure.
Yeah,
from EMI Records.
Yeah.
And it was a production in which Tim Rice was playing the narrator or something. I can't remember. I think he must have been. He was definitely in it, yes.
Wow.
Anyway, all that is a very, very long time ago, so it's hard for me to remember detail.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Question 3. If you were, Prime Minister for the day and could change any law or impose a new law, what would it be? Fiona, what would you do?
Oh, very quickly, just thinking, I would love it if people who, there are people that study theology, they become theologians, and they're not Christians. And so they've got no interest in being in a relationship with the Lord at all. They just want to study the Bible and then teach it as a very academic thing.
Yes.
And I think it would be great if you couldn't do that, if you weren't able to go and teach unless you had an intimate relationship with the Lord and you were filled with his loving presence. But I don't think that would be possible. Well, but that's just what I'm saying.
The cynical side of me would say, "Oh, I wonder how many churches would not have a vicar on Sunday if that law came out."
Well, possibly. Who knows? But it would just. It's just so wonderful when somebody who really loves the Lord and is in a relationship with Him teaches the Word of God. Because it's about finding out about God's heart.
It's so different.
It's so different. Yeah.
Never had that answer before. That's a great one. Thank you, Fiona. Paul, sir, you're Prime Minister today. What would you do?
Apart from stopping certain legislation which has been before the courts, before the public and the Houses of Parliament, and also the extension of the ultra-low emission zone, get to the absolute outskirts of London, and probably in a few years' time, well beyond. No, I decided that those weren't sufficiently important. So my answer to this question is really, at the very least, reducing the amount of time that people can abort children. And certainly I would begin by imprisoning anybody who tried to allow it to happen after the birth. Anyway, that is very much legislation that I would.
Wow. Well, wait till you hear Anne Widdecombe's answer. I recorded her on Wednesday, and that'll be going out sometime in March.
Wow.
It seems to be the number one answer on this particular podcast. Thank you, Paul, for that. Thank you. Question 4, outside of family events, what has been your most enjoyable day out? Fiona?
Okay. This is a thing that I didn't expect to happen. So I didn't expect it to happen, and I certainly didn't expect it to be enjoyable. Paul and I got an invitation to go to number 10 Downing Street.
Okay.
And this was a few years ago. And I thought it was a hoax, completely a hoax. And I just thought, don't be ridiculous. This can't be true. Well, I thought, well, possibly Paul might be invited, but I certainly didn't think I would be.
But I had a gig.
But you had a gig, and the invitations were separate. They weren't, to both of us. It was separate. So I was just slightly amazed. I was free. And I thought, well, is this really true? Yes, we did some investigations. It was. So I decided, okay, I'll go. So I remember going through the sort of, the bag check and everything. And the people before me walked down the road, went into number 10. And then I walked down the road on my own. And it was quite nice that I was on my own because it was very surreal to me. And I knocked on the door. The door opened, showed the invitation, and I wasn't turned away. So in I went. And they took my bags, they took my phone, and then they told me, go up the stairs and turn left and go down the corridor and so on and so forth. And I was walking up the stairs and seeing all these prime ministers, seeing all these paintings and praying under my breath, just praying over the place, just thinking of lovely things to pray for whoever would come into that building. And then walked down the corridor and came to these two big double doors, and I had to go in there. And there were about 60, 70 people in there.
Wow.
And wonderfully, there were people I knew. There were people in media who are Christians. There were people who, do missions or are bishops and heads of churches, people in the theatre world that are Christians. Yeah. So it was lovely to see all these people because there was no clue as to why you were just going to this gathering, but they hadn't made it clear at all. Yeah. And so I'm seeing all these lovely people, talking to different people in politics. And then suddenly David Cameron, who was at the time Prime Minister, he stood up and he began to thank everybody. And he began to thank everybody for doing what they did as Christians and for being in Christian ministry of sorts. And honestly, you could have knocked me down with a feather. I was so shocked. I think the whole room was shocked. There was just silence. And everybody was slightly sort of warmed. And I drove home thinking, that was amazing. Did that really happen? And I know that they do that sort of thing. They will have groups of people that they thank for doing. But it just seemed like it was very special that there was any clue that anybody was doing what they do in Christian ministry.
Wow. Thank you, Fiona. That's brilliant to be able to go to number 10. Brilliant.
It was.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, where was your gig that night? Can you remember?
No, I can't remember. It's all a bit of a blur. But no, it's not. I mean, but the thing is, there are things that you have to remember and things absolutely. That you don't have to remember. Absolutely. And where that gig was doesn't really matter.
No,
just I was working.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great answer. Thank you, Fiona. So, outside of family events, what has been your most enjoyable day out, Paul?
Well, in the end, enjoyable is probably not even strong enough word, really. I would have to choose the day in 1984.
I knew it.
When Cliff Richard had invited us to go to White City Stadium and hear this man I had never heard of, called Luis Palau.
Yes.
Who he said, you and Fiona really need to hear him. This is part of our testimony that I'm giving you now. I sort of havered a bit, I'm kind of busy, Cliff, and all that sort of stuff. And Cliff said, look, I'll tell you what, just pick your day and I'll buy you dinner afterwards. And I said, okay, bless him. Cliff actually had been told by the Lord to invite as many people as possible in show business to come and hear Luis Palau.
Wow.
And I think maybe it was Luis who had told him, but it was from the Lord anyway. But there were loads of them, including us that particular night. But I mean, Luis Palau was there for about 6 weeks.
He was, yeah.
And
QPR ground,
each
wasn't it?
night. Sorry?
It was the QPR ground, Loftus Road, wasn't it?
Yes, White City Stadium, yes. Well, it had been QPR's ground. In fact, actually, I said to Cliff at the time, I said, who's this Luis Palau? I mean, he's going to be there for a whole month? He must have delusions of grandeur. Queen's Park Rangers can't fill it on one Saturday afternoon.
Oh, it's a nice ground, though.
But it actually, in the end, it wasn't just a month. It was 6 weeks in the end, because they extended it because so many people wanted to go.
Wow. So
anyway, we went, and one of the things that happened was that there was this kind of mini demonstration. I mean, people thinking they were important, with kind of leaflets saying, "This man is an idiot. Don't believe anything he says."
Oh, really?
And sort of, and trying to disrupt. Well, it was ridiculous. There were sort of over 16,000 people in that stadium, all there to hear Luis Palau. And like half a dozen or so, or maybe a dozen of these people sort of trying to demonstrate against it, which was pathetic. Anyway, I do remember that as being part of the day. And, there was a huge gospel choir that sang, and it's sort of one of the many oxymoronic elements of my atheist life, that as an atheist I loved gospel music. I loved Mahalia Jackson, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Sam Cooke with the Soul Stirrers, all of that sort of stuff, and I just adored it. Anyway, that was beautiful. And then they all sat down, and Cliff got up just with an acoustic guitar. He sang 2 songs entirely on his own. And that was lovely. And then he sat down, and Luis Palau got up, and he started preaching. And boy, it was so powerful. It was so precise. I mean, it was so precisely aimed at us. And we both gave our lives to Jesus that day.
Wow.
Not only that, but we went out for dinner with Cliff and Luis Palau and a couple of those other celebrities that Cliff had persuaded to come.
Wow.
Certainly, it's enjoyable, but way more than enjoyable for me.
Yeah, take the letters JOY out of enjoyable and put them where, on their own. Absolutely. They'll do. It was joy.
It was joy.
I've got to ask, without name dropping, obviously, the other couple that came for the meal with you, and Cliff and Luis, did they ever become Christians? Do you know?
Don't know. They might have done. We don't know.
I don't know. I do know that one of them was and has remained a good friend of Cliff's.
Oh, that's good.
Where he's at
the moment,
I'm not sure.
Oh, wow, that's brilliant. I had the honour of interviewing Luis Palau and spend on a one-to-one with him for about an hour. What a gracious man he was. Absolutely. Brilliant. And he then very graciously, he didn't have to, he wrote me a lovely letter afterwards, which I still kept. It was very, absolutely fantastic. Great stuff. This has been the longest we've ever had for these questions. It's brilliant. That's how it should be. Because now it's a conversation piece. Yes, I knew you'd say that in 1984. I thought you were going to say the day you got married, so I got it wrong.
But that was definitely a family matter, so I thought it was excluded.
Good point. You
see, that's the thing. You made it quite tricky because most of our really wonderful, enjoyable times have been together.
Yeah.
And so that's why it was hard to find something that wasn't together.
Well, I thought that White City Stadium counted because at that point we were not family.
Yeah.
We were not married.
Yeah, no, that's great. Very well dug out, and I'll give my slap on the wrist for ever suggesting otherwise. Thank you.
By the way, just one more element of that day, which I may as well mention, is I proposed and Jay agreed.
Oh, wow. Wow.
That's right.
That's brilliant, isn't it? It's just a pity that White City has been knocked down now. It's a shopping centre, isn't it? I think, if I remember rightly. But yeah, wow, brilliant. Question 5. What has been your most embarrassing moment? Let's go with Fiona again, please.
Okay. Working at the Royal Shakespeare Company was an amazing thing to do. However, during rehearsals, there are games that very often directors want to play to sort of loosen everybody up, to get everybody really confident and, communicating with each other really, really well. And I have never, in the past, when I did that sort of thing, I never enjoyed doing these games. They always seemed really silly to me. Anyway, so here we are with this lovely director, Adrian Noble, in rehearsals, and he got everybody to stand in a big circle, and it was one of those games, and he said, I want you all, one by one, to run into the middle of the circle, leap in the air, and declare a Shakespearean line. And I thought, how awful is this? I do not want to do this. And very silly. I should have just got on with it, but I didn't. So everybody went. Everyone ran into the middle, leaped, said a line of Shakespeare, and ran into the other side of the circle. And eventually, everybody had gone except me. And I'm just standing there looking down at my feet. And Adrian Noble kind of looked around, and everybody knew that I hadn't gone. He knew that I hadn't gone, and he said, well, has everybody been? There was a silence, and I'm just looking down at my feet. And he said, all right, then let's move on. And I was so embarrassed because I thought, why didn't you just do it?
Yeah.
It would have been.
You didn't do it because you thought you'd be embarrassed.
But I was more embarrassed that I hadn't gone after all of that. So anyway,
that's just a good point. No, but that's a really good more moral to the story. You were more embarrassed after it, even though you felt embarrassed beforehand. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
That's very good. No, thank you for that. That's a good learning exercise. Paul, what's yours, sir?
Oh, his is great. His is absolutely good.
Mine involves playing the harmonica. The great composer, great musical maestro, Henry Mancini.
Yes.
The writer of, among many, many things, Moon River and so on.
Pink Panther.
He was recording at Abbey Road Studios, which everybody knows about. And it was a huge orchestra. Mm-hmm. And not only a huge orchestra, but a very large choir as well. So, Abbey Road #1, Studio 1, was really quite crammed, quite full. Masses of musicians. And one of the pieces that he recorded that day, he was doing an album, which was a tribute to another composer, Ennio Morricone.
Yeah.
And there was one particular piece that Morricone had written, which had a very small harmonica part in it. So I was booked to do this. And there was Henry Mancini in the center of the studio and all the musicians around and the choir over at the far end on a raised platform. And there was about, 30, 40, 50 bars of music before I came in. And it was going absolutely wonderfully. And then it was the moment when I would play the harmonica. And Mancini looked over at me and nodded, and I played a wrong note. The whole place froze. Silence. Mancini stood there just looking at me with a sort of quizzical expression on his face. I said, Maestro, I am very sorry. The holes in a harmonica are very small. And all the orchestra roared with laughter. They were clapping and banging their instruments. And it was so embarrassing. Anyway, we went for a second take, and this time we got it. But my goodness, I have never got over completely the humiliation of that moment.
Oh, wow. Wow. It was a good answer, though. It's almost as good as It's All in the Right Order, but not all the note. I'm playing all the right notes, but not necessarily the right order. Yeah, that's brilliant. Can you remember what the piece of music was, Paul, by any chance?
It's gone.
Because if it was Ennio Morricone, I think it's A Fistful of Dollars. There's a classic piece of harmonica in that. If you know the prog rock band Muse, they've nicked that and they play the harmonica version of it, especially on the live album.
Oh no, it wasn't that. No, definitely not.
No, it's a good story.
What was it? I don't know.
It's a good story. Thank you guys for those questions and those answers. Absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyed listening to them. I said right at the very beginning, Paul and Fiona, in my introduction, about this can be a show, a programme, a podcast, whatever you want to call it, to encourage those that are being disillusioned. And throughout your career, especially when you become a Christian and you say going for a job interview, an audition, and you might feel disillusioned as a result of not getting it. What does the word disillusioned mean to you guys?
Disillusioned? To get disillusioned, you have to have an illusion in the first place. I suppose atheism was my illusion. And I tell you, when the prospect of possibly becoming a Christian arose, I was frightened. I was frightened because I had been so confident and mouthy about being an atheist. I was so sure that I was right that I could see humiliation on the horizon, and I didn't want it. But when the moment came, I was so happy. I was so overjoyed, actually, to say goodbye to the nonsense of atheism. That all that kind of apprehension about people would laugh at me and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Who cares? Of course people laugh at you. They think they're so smart. I know, because I was there.
Yeah.
When, my goodness, if only they could all know and understand.
Well, I mean, the thing is that you're disillusioned. I remember being disillusioned with just this life, living this life without the Lord, because, it's that scripture, isn't it, that says, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his life, his soul? This world you can gain. We know people who have a lot, and they said it never satisfied. They were always disillusioned, and we relate to that. But when you come to the one who made you, suddenly there's purpose in everything you do. There is a purpose in your life. So that would be disillusionment. For me and probably you. Yes.
What's it like as an actor then to go for a job you're thinking, I'm going to get it, only to find out that you didn't get it despite giving it your all?
Obviously, it's disappointing. It's very disappointing. But it depends where you're coming from. Before I became a Christian, I'd go away feeling terribly insecure, desperately upset. And thinking, what could I have done better? Well, it was probably nothing you could do better, because it's often to do with the height or the size of you or the color of you or whatever. But after I became a Christian, there's this more sort of, well, that wasn't meant to be. There's something better. But it is of course it's disappointing, isn't it? If you go for something and you've given all your heart, but it's not bad for us, because there's always something better along the way. There's always going to be something better along the way.
You said something there, Fiona, actually. I'm glad you said the word, and that was insecure. And I didn't know whether to ask you this question or not from when I was thinking up last night. But I remember interviewing the lead actor around about 2000, 2001 for the travelling version of When an Inspector Calls. And we had an amazing an hour and a half in the studio. And we ended up discussing why actors can be very insecure people off stage. And it's as if it's the audience adulation that they crave, to feel that they're wanted. And that's what drives them. What are your views on that?
Well, just very quickly to say also, I think the thing is, you're absolutely right. When you become a character, you're not you. It's very nice to become someone else, to go into your dressing room in the evening before the show, put on that wig, put on that makeup of that particular character, put on those clothes that you're going to wear, read that script, so you're going to be in that play, you're going to be portraying that person. It's not you. So you can then become that person fully. And I think it's absolutely true. A lot of people who are actors or artists, creative people, are very sensitive people. Creative people often are. They often wear their hearts on their sleeves, and they feel greatly and are sort of more likely to fall into emotional heights or lows. So playing a person is a lovely way to sort of hide yourself. Outside of that, it becomes, difficult sometimes, I think.
Yeah. Paul?
I agree with all of that. I also think this. I guess I was quite fortunate, really, because in the very early days of acting, for me, I'd had hit records and all sorts of things like that. But I never, not since the sixth form at school have I done any acting. I actually was schooled just before I accepted the very first thing I did on the stage in London by a director who was very, very keen on the method. And one of the things that he instilled in me was that the job of any actor, whether he's playing Hamlet or Yorick, I can't be playing Yorick, that's a skull.
Oh, right. Or Baron Bad Breath.
The Gravedigger.
Yes.
Whether he's playing Hamlet or the Gravedigger, has the same purpose: to serve the play, to serve what the evening is going to be for the audience. Okay. And when you have that attitude, there's no kind of what about me in it. If you what about me once, you've gone wrong. You're off the plot.
It's teamwork, isn't it?
Yeah.
In a play.
Yeah.
Teamwork.
Once you are more important than the play, you're wrong.
But obviously not everybody, not everybody. There are some very wonderful, confident people who are actors, off stage, when they're not playing, there are people that are very sure and not insecure. But sometimes that sort of tenderness makes people very good at what they do. Songwriters and singers, sometimes there's people who have that kind of tenderness, that maybe tendency to get a little bit insecure, are actually amazing when they perform. And very, they can really get to the bottom of a character very, very beautifully.
Would it be fair or unfair to say that maybe musicians are more stronger in their character, less insecure, than actors, or would it be about the same? Do you think, Paul?
I think it's kind of different with singers, because unless you're in an opera, when really the same rules apply as in a play, when you're doing a song, another song, a third song, and a fourth song, then the plot changes slightly, because you're there to do the song to the best of your ability, and sometimes actually that requires. Well, it does with acting and singing. It requires desiring to do the best thing technically that you can do, as well as emotively and all that sort of stuff. So I do think, though, that as far as sort of popular music is concerned, singing can be very much part of an ego trip, much more than acting. Am I right about that?
Possibly. I think people perform differently. It depends. Some people vocally are very talented, are more like an instrument, and they sing as if they're a saxophone or something. Others have got great voices, but are going to think about the words a bit more. And you've got both.
And other people think about the moves.
Other people think about the moves.
Throwing the shapes.
Absolutely. Everybody's different, and it's all whatever the creative thing that's in that person, I suppose.
Yeah, got you. Well, how easy or difficult can it be then for a husband and wife, Paul and Fiona, to be in the entertainment business?
It's been really easy and good.
Yeah.
And I think what's been good about it is that you understand each other. You know, I understand, you know, the concerts and the late nights and all of those things. And Paul has always understood, you know, what I've been doing, and then doing ministry together. It's great, actually, because it's really been easy for us. It's not like one is saying, why are you doing this and this? Because we completely get it.
Yes. When we do ministry, I mean, it's grown out of just giving our testimony.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I do this, you do that, I do this, you do that. And it flows and builds together. And so once again, we know that we're both in service of the finished result.
Yeah, good. Fiona, because of your husband, and obviously you know quite a lot of his songs, and most probably all of them, and the films, have you seen the film Privilege that he starred in?
No, I've never seen that. You know, Paul looks great and he looks really young, but there is actually an age gap between us. So it's actually 17 and a half years.
Yeah,
so,
I wasn't referring to when it came out, by the way.
Oh, right. No. Of course you weren't. I assumed you weren't. But no, I haven't seen it. I've seen pictures and things like that. Paul sort of told me a little bit about it, and I thought, it's probably not the kind of film that I would enjoy, so I've never watched it. No.
Well, I must admit, there is a trailer for it on IMDb, which I was watching last night. And the reason I'm saying this is about a worshipped pop singer who is disillusioned, apparently. Amazingly, the Church of England want him to boost church attendance, and it's a misuse of power in an age of an illusion, is one of the comments that's made. And his handlers want him to support God and country next. And I'm thinking, whoa, you know, this is before you became a Christian. I wonder how much that film had an influence on you, trying to bring you out of your illusionment of atheism, Paul.
Well, actually, that film would have strengthened my atheism, because the picture of what the church was like was not attractive. No, mind you, it would have disillusioned one, not merely about the church, but about politics and about most other things as well. But I think Peter Watkins, the director, was very much on the warpath against the establishment of any kind. And I just basically went along with it. It was an interesting job, in as much as I'd never done anything like it before. But I'd have to say that not only has Fiona not seen it since then, but I haven't seen it since then either. And it certainly wouldn't be how I would, if I weren't in it, I would look at that sort of trailer or something and go, well, that's something I won't be watching. So I don't know what else to say about that.
It's worth watching the trailer because it's done by an American, and the voiceover is an American, so it's obviously the American market. So quite an interesting take from that point of view alone. But let's move on from that.
In the long run, I believe that it has done better in America than it ever did over here.
Oh, right.
It was pronounced a flop, and I'm not sure it ever made any money.
Wow.
But all of which is sort of neither here nor there as far as I'm concerned, now and at any time in between.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. But I tell you what, I would love to ask you guys, and there is a reason for this, because doing some research on both of you, it turns out that, Paul, you dropped out of university. What were you studying?
I was reading English literature.
And what made you give up?
What made me do that, or what made me stop?
What made you give up? Yeah, what made you give up?
Music. I'd been sort of toying with music for a while, but from sort of skiffle in 1956 onwards. But I heard sort of jazz and blues while I was at university. And I'd heard those things before I went to university, but it had been sort of, oh, that's great. I like to do that. Like listening to that. But something happened during that first year that I was at university, I actually heard a record by an artist called T-Bone Walker, wonderful electric guitarist, and one of the earliest people to amplify the guitar. He also had a harmonica player on this particular record that I heard, and that was a guy called Junior Wells.
Yes.
And I thought, I'm wasting my time with this university business. I want to do that for a living.
Yeah.
So I started to do that, and I just hardly spent any time working on the English literature, and
went from there. Wow. The reason I'm asking this, and Fiona, I'd love to know, before you became an actress, did you have a serious job before then?
No, I didn't. I started, I did ballet when I was a little girl, like lots of little girls. It went really well, and so my dancing teacher decided that I needed to go to the Royal Ballet. She thought I would be able to get in. I was very tiny. I'm quite tall now, but I was very small at that point, very small and short. It took a long time to grow. But anyway, so I auditioned for the Royal Ballet, and they measured me. And when they measured me, they measured that I was going to be very tall. Well, I'm not that tall, but I'm 5'9.5". So, and they wouldn't take me. So at that point, I mean, talk about disillusioned that I was. My little heart was, and so I decided then to sort of go into the drama a bit and into singing a bit. So that's what happened. So I just progressed that way, and then studied dance and drama and all of that kind of thing. And so, no, I began, as soon as I left studying, I started auditioning. At 19 years of age, I went up for my very first West End show. I didn't have an agent. I got hold of a newspaper called The Stage newspaper. I don't know if it's still going, but it probably is. And on the back pages of The Stage newspaper are auditions. And I saw this, and it said, the life story of Elvis Presley at the Astoria Theatre. One girl was leaving, need a girl to be able to sing and dance rock and roll to take over from this girl that was leaving. And so I thought to myself, could I do this? It was an open audition, which meant that, you didn't have to have an agent. And I'd done absolutely nothing. And so I just decided to turn up on this open audition day. And of course, when I got to the stage door, there were a big back queue of girls going right round the block, and they were all kind of dressed up in their sort of show business outfits. And I got on the end of the queue. And I wasn't prepared at all. And these girls obviously knew a bit, because they were sort of in their silver sparkly shoes and big hair and big makeup. And I was standing on the end of this queue in my jeans and jumper thinking, oh dear me. Anyway, bit by bit, I went in and I did audition. And I remember singing I Don't Know How to Love Him from Jesus Christ Superstar. I was so nervous. I mean, I literally could not spit. I had no spit in my mouth at all. It was very, very difficult to sing. But somehow I made it through that audition. And I was so nervous that I was sort of hitting notes I didn't normally hit. It was just fear, really. I was just hitting these notes and singing the song in a kind of... And when I finished, the musical director came running to the front and he said, Fiona. I said, yes. He said, that was amazing. And I said, I know. And he said, I'm going to give you the job. And so it was a complete surprise. Wow. So that's how I then went into that show, Elvis. The swing girl who taught me the steps, the dance steps and all the moves and everything was Tracy Ullman. Don't know if you know who I mean by Tracy Ullman.
Oh, no, I do. Because did you remember? Yeah. I'll tell you more in a minute. Carry on.
So Tracy and I actually at that point became really good friends. And so there were 4 girls in the show. There were 2 bands. And then there were 3 Elvises playing the young Elvis, the middle Elvis. Shakin' Stevens was the middle Elvis.
He was.
And then there was the sort of Las Vegas Elvis. And I was one of the 4. And I absolutely loved it. And the girl I was taking over from was a really beautiful girl called, she was a bit older than me. Anyway, I won't say her name, but she was a Christian. Now, here I am, I'm not a Christian. And she was a Christian, and everybody talked about how lovely, I'll say her first name, her name was Anna. And everybody said, oh, Anna was lovely, Anna was this, Anna's this, something else. And I was fascinated by this girl, Anna. And we stayed in touch for a little while, and she invited me to Waterloo, where there was going to be a meeting run by Cliff Richard and Nigel Goodwin.
Oh.
And yes. And
the Arts Centre Group.
The Arts Centre Group. And it was for people in the theatre world to come and hear the gospel, have some wine and have something to eat. And I began to go there from time to time. So that was, But no, I went straight from study, went straight into West End shows and into plays and touring. And very early at 22, I got into the Royal National Theatre.
Wow.
So that was very exciting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, right at the very beginning, I said I have additional questions for you. And the question for Paul was, what is the connection between Shakin' Stevens, PJ Proby and Tracy Ullman?
No.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was the question. Now, would Paul have got the answer?
Well, I suppose it is Elvis, isn't it?
Yeah.
But was Shakin' Stevens was the middle one. Tracy was in it.
Yes.
But Proby was originally
in it.
The last one, wasn't he?
He was originally
the Las Vegas.
The Las Vegas one.
Yeah.
He had to go, and he was replaced by Bogdan Komanovsky.
That's right.
I haven't.
So that was. I would have got that, but only because I know.
Wow.
Wow.
But you see, the thing is, it's like, I suppose it's like going back to Joseph, follow your dream. Your dream was obviously to be involved in ballet stroke drama without having a job beforehand, whereas Paul had a job, but he then wanted to pursue his career in music. And I'm hoping that we could sort of tie this up by saying that those listening today, if you have a dream and you haven't done anything about it, pray about it and see where God takes you.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. He wants to do that. You know, we have, if you ever feel inside yourself, there should be more. There's got to be more than this. It's because there is more. Mm-hmm. We were all created for the more, and we were all created. Everybody's got something that they can do and that they love to do and that they're passionate to do and they want to do. And we shouldn't suppress that. We should pray and say, Father, help me get. Well, in fact, it's interesting because about a week ago, I was praying, and I was just praying over our year, and I was praying over the things that are coming up in our lives. And there are some things that are, deep in my heart that I want to see happen. And the Lord spoke into my heart, and he just said these words. He just said, I'll get you there, my daughter.
Wow.
I'll get you there.
Wow.
And I just, the tears came, and I just said, thank you, Father, thank you. And he wants to get us all there, whatever it is, whoever you are, whatever the situation, he wants to get us there. Yeah. Wherever our there is.
Yes.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, my dream has always been for Bristol City to win the FA Cup, but I don't see that.
Oh.
I can't quite see that in God's plan somehow. But you just never know. Be a laugh if it was. Listen, we're running out of time, so we better close really with the hero slot, if that's all right. Every time we do a podcast, I always ask for the guest or guests to share who their favourite Christian hero is. The Christian hero has to be someone that's dead and not in the Bible. That way we can't be told in years to come, well, do you remember choosing such and such and whatever. So with that in mind, who would like to go first?
You want to
After you.
All right.
Ladies first.
Okay. All right. Well, my hero obviously is the Lord, but this man, his name, Kenneth Hagin, became a reverend, a wonderful, wonderful man who had an amazing testimony. He shouldn't have been born, really. His mother had him at home, midwife there. She was extremely, extremely ill. He was born so tiny you could put him in the palm of your hand. The midwife checked him over, thought, no, he's dead. put him in a brown paper bag and was going to bury him in the garden because she was more concerned about his mother, who was very, very sick. But just before she went to put him in the garden, she thought, oh, I'll take him out one more time and have a look at him. And she thought, well, it seems to be some sort of life about him. She boiled a little glass container, put some boiled milk in it, and tried to put it to his tiny little lips. Of course, he started to splutter, so she knew he was alive. And he grew up very weakly, very sick, all of this. When he was 16 years of age, he was bedfast, and they said that would happen to him. He had some kind of organic heart situation. But do you know what? He didn't want to die. They said, no, you're going to die. You will die. And doctors, everybody. He had people come who were sort of men of the cloth, came to say, it's all right, my boy, it'll soon be over. It'll soon be over. But what was amazing about this Kenneth Hagin is he wouldn't give up. He got hold of a Bible, and in his lucid moments during a day, which were very few, he would read the Bible. He got to Mark chapter 11 in the Bible, in the New Testament, where it says, and when you pray, believe that you receive them, and ye shall have them. Believe you receive the answer to your prayer, and you shall have it. He asked God to heal him. Wow. He meditated on that scripture for months and months and months. And one day he said to the Lord, I believe that I am healed. Would you help me? And the Lord showed him how he could actually manifest that healing. He said to him, I want you to believe you are healed before you even see the changes in your body. And Kenneth Hagin said, I see it. I see it. I believe that I received my healing even though I don't feel it right now. And he tried to get out of bed, put his little paralyzed legs over the side of the bed, managed to get himself to the pole, a wooden pole that was, he had like a sort of a four-poster-y type bed. Yes. Yeah. And he pulled himself up and he felt these pins and needles going through his body. And yet, even though it was very, very painful, he could feel parts of his body he'd never felt before. Well, go on to say he began to walk bit by bit, and he had a miracle of healing when he was meant to die. He went on, spent the rest of his days on earth telling people of the goodness of God. And I just love that courage and that oomph. And because of that, I would say he has been such a hero. Every time I felt a little down, I thought about his testimony and thought, wow, Lord, you're so great. Wow. You are a miracle worker.
How many years, Fiona, how many years ago are we talking about for Kenneth Hagin?
How many years did he live?
No,
or how many?
When we're talking about the time span when he was around.
He died.
He died about
something like 10 years ago.
Yeah, maybe 15 years ago. So he was
about 84, 85.
A little bit older than that. He was about 86, 87 when he went to heaven.
In other words, having been given up for dead any day now, he then had 70 years of ministry.
Yeah.
Wow.
And such courage. And he wouldn't take what the doctors had said as, that's the end of it.
Yes.
And I just love that courage.
Yes. I've heard the name. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay.
Yeah, that will encourage many people, I'm sure. Pray and see what happens. That's great. Thank you. Paul, good sir, who is your Christian hero, please?
Well, mine is very simple. Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Wow.
I was very young when she acceded to the throne. She wasn't much older, actually. And she wasn't my hero at that time, although her dad was my dad's hero.
Oh, really?
My father cried. I mean, he was not a man given to crying very much, but he cried when King George VI died. And I remember that very distinctly. Anyway, I just sort of didn't really take much particular notice of the Queen. But over years, of course, by the time we had become Christians, it started to be very obvious that we had a person on the throne of this country who was a very serious, committed, convicted Christian herself. And over the last years, I've seen that growing in strength and in boldness, and to the point where she was making quite sure that people who helped with the speech writing knew that they had to get that in. Considering how many people would sort of rather we had a republic or weren't in the least bit impressed with her beliefs and wanted to be atheists and indeed mocked those beliefs, she was very, very strong. And this aroused my admiration some years ago. And for the last 10 years or so of her life, she really became, you have to say heroine, don't you? But she certainly did become somebody that I could make a hero of.
Yeah, it was certainly, I think in the last 20 years, the Christmas messages all of a sudden took off in a direction of, she's open about her faith. It was mind-blowing what happened there. Absolutely fantastic.
It really was, wasn't it? It really was. It was as if she thought to herself, I've got to be bold now because I'm not going to be here forever and I need to do something, wasn't it? Was it as if she had...
Yes, there was an imperative there.
Yes.
Something. I think it was gradual rather than sudden. But anyway, it was something massively impressive to me.
Yes, yeah. I remember going to Windsor Chapel, this is 20 years ago, and I wanted to see inside the famous poem that King George VI made famous, just to see where it was, because I knew by then that he was a Christian. What he had to go through that then passed on to Elizabeth was quite something. Did either of you ever get the chance to meet the Queen?
No. We met her sister more than once when we were doing Guys and Dolls.
Oh wow!
And around that time,
and different West End shows, royalty would come afterwards, and then we would
Princess Anne would come.
We did go to a party with Princess Anne there one time, and we had a lovely chat with her, didn't we, about ice skating? Actually, she really likes ice skating.
Oh right.
Wasn't that Margaret?
Margaret. Excuse me. It was Princess Margaret. Forgive me. Yeah.
Princess Anne at the Savoy for some reason.
Yeah.
These things sort of do.
You've chosen two great heroes. Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you so much, Fiona, for joining us today. It's been an absolute privilege for me to listen to you, and just thank you so much for spending the time today. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
No, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye.